Well, it's great to be here with you all. Let's start with a prayer. Father God, we thank you for gathering us together to be in your presence. We can gather in your name. We can draw close to you. We can learn how to walk in your ways more closely, more effectively, to understand your love for us more deeply, and in so doing draw closer to each other, to be encouragers and cheerleaders and champions for each other. Father, I pray that this afternoon that the words spoken would be your truth, that would be not words that I need to say, but what we all need to hear. And I pray this in the name of your precious Son, Jesus. Amen. Yeah, so I guess what I want to start with, something I've been taught is to always give credit where credit is due. So I guess, what I want to say, by way of that, I just want to say, I'd love to say that this is stuff that I'd figured out all by myself because I'm just so awesome and wise, but actually it was taught to me by a woman called Danny Johnson, and I learned what I'm about to teach you in a business seminar of all places. I grew up in the church. I've been a believer for 35, sort of since sort of really taking faith on as my own. It's probably been 35 years, going on 40 years, I'd never been taught this. And I'd sort of, it's probably been one of the most important things, arguably one of the most important things I've learnt in my life as a follower of Jesus. So there's something that we all encounter and we all are influenced and wrestle with, whether we're aware of it or not. And this one thing, it's been related to or connected to things like feelings of hopelessness, feelings of helplessness, feelings of not being valuable. It's been related to stress, to anxiety, to fear, to depression, and even thoughts of suicide. And I know that because that list is all from my own experience. My understanding is, though not my experience, thankfully, is that it's also connected to things like high blood pressure, heart disease, and cancer, and a bunch of other illnesses. It's something that can just completely debilitate you. It's also connected to things like unrealized dreams, destinies that are kind of aborted and never realized. It's this huge, it can be a huge wall in our lives that will stop us from walking the things we're supposed to and becoming the people that we are supposed to become. And so what I want to teach you today is a skill that you can use to deal with this thing that I've just described, a way of cutting it off, putting it in its place, and being able to push past it and move on with your life and the things that you are supposed to walk into. Anyone curious as to what that thing is? Okay, cool. So the thing is unforgiveness. So, sometimes referred to as bitterness in the scriptures. And it is connected to all those things that I described. When we hold on to wrongs against us, when we hold unforgiveness in our heart, when we don't let go of the wounds of the past, those things can snowball and develop into all those things that I described. It can be something that will just leave you stuck in your life where you are and never get past those experiences, those memories, those wounds, and step into the things that God has for you. And so the skill, funnily enough, that I want to teach you is forgiveness. How to take bitterness and unforgiveness and kill it dead, forgive, and move on. And again, I grew up in the church. I've been a believer my whole life, an active kind of follower of Jesus since the age of 16. But in all that time, I was never equipped and never given the skills to really forgive and move on. And so I collected, as we all do, just piles and piles of baggage that I was just dragging through life with me. So, forgiveness. So what is it and what isn't it? It's, I think it's often confused and mistaken. So I guess what I'd start by saying is forgiveness is not saying that something that was done to you is okay. It is not excusing a wrong that has been done to you. It is not saying that something is not sin. It is not saying that it doesn't matter. It is not saying that it didn't hurt you and you haven't paid a huge price because of what was done. And I think sometimes that's what we think it is. It's like we're just forgive and forget, forgive and move on, and just take it lightly and not worry about it. And that is definitely not what forgiveness is about. Forgiveness has to recognize that the wrong done, that the wound inflicted is real and matters and has caused a cost and a price in your life in order to move forward. So that being the case, what is forgiveness? I believe that it is us being set free from the wound that has been done to us, from the wrong that has been done to us. It is really about setting yourself free more so than setting someone else free. Whilst they may well be set free, that's kind of up to them, but primarily it is about us being set free and released from the burden of that debt that we are carrying. One of the analogies I'd like to use when I'm thinking of forgiveness is accounting. And so I don't know how many people here have you either done your own books, or you run a business, or maybe you do stuff at home. And so there's a concept of you do work for someone, or you sell someone a product, and then the expectation is that they pay you for the for the work that you've done. And I'll tell you a story. So I did some work for a guy. Let's call him Alan. And so I did a whole bunch of work, and I sold him some product. And for a while he was paying me, but then there came a point where he was saying, I can't pay you just yet. I can't pay you just yet. And so, but he was a good guy. I'd done a lot of work for him over the years. So I kept going. I kept doing more and more work, and still he didn't pay me. And so there came a point where he owed me a whole lot of money, and I realized, okay, this is not going to get paid. And so eventually I sort of cut my ties with this guy, moved on, started working for other people. But in the process of doing the work and selling him some product, I'd put into my accounting package, invoices for the work that I had done. Here are the hours that I worked, here's my hourly rate, this is what you owe me, send him the invoice. Similarly for the product. So I had all these accounts receivable in my accounting package. So he owed me substantial amount of money, and there it was. I was carrying it on my books. It was there every time I opened my accounting software. There it was, accounts receivable, X $1,000 that hasn't been paid, and so I was carrying that. I was carrying that for I don't know, probably like more than 10 years. And
it was a substantial amount.
Yeah, it was like $80,000. And there a bunch of other stuff had gone on with with me and him. But that was that was a tangible thing, and there it was in the books, and it wasn't until there was a bunch of other stuff that I had to kind of work through, but again the numbers are on the books. He owed me because of what he had done. He had not paid me. I'd done work he had not paid me, so he'd hurt me. There it was on the books. And so the only way for me to get that off the books, out of accounts receivable, was either he paid me, which was never going to happen, or I had to go into my accounting package and forgive those debts. I had to say, okay, I'm taking this out of accounts receivable. I am no longer expecting this to be paid to me. I'm blanking it out. It's gone. It's done. It's no longer on my books. There's no longer any expectation that I will receive this. I will get paid back. And I think that forgiveness, and they actually call that debt forgiveness. When you wipe that out, you're forgiving the person's debt. And I think that's, real forgiveness is very, very much like that. Because what you're saying is someone has hurt me, someone has wronged me. They have done something that I did not deserve. And so now I'm carrying a debt that I'm expecting or hoping would be paid back. They've done damage to my life. What forgiveness is saying is, I'm taking it off the books. I'm releasing that person from the debt that they owe me. I no longer hold the wrong that they did against me. And so it's not saying that they didn't hurt me. So I never said that, I never did that work for Alan. I never sold him that product. I'm saying he no longer owes me anything. And so when we forgive a person for hurt that they have done to us, we're saying, okay, I'm going to take, the price and the debt that I've paid enduring this, and I'm cancelling it. I'm wiping it out. This person no longer owes me anything. I have no expectation on them. I hold nothing against them. And in that, when we do that, there is just enormous freedom. Using the analogy of the accounting package, because I forgave that debt, now when I open my accounting package and go to the company accounts, there isn't like $80,000 in accounts receivable every single time I open it, reminding me of a bad deal. And that's the same in our lives, that when we forgive wrongs that are done to us, the slate is wiped out and the reminder is taken away. And people, I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, we need to forgive and forget. Has anyone heard that? Has anyone had trouble with that? Yeah. Has anyone said forgive and forget? Yeah, right. And that's very, very true, because and for me that was the case until I learned the skill of forgiving, like truly forgiving. I couldn't forget. Because the pain is still there, the scar is still there, the wound is still there, and it's still hurting us. How do you, if you had a gaping wound open on your arm and someone said just forget about it, would you be able to?
Just get over it.
Yeah, just get over it. It's like, don't worry. Just don't look at it. It's like, you can't because it's there. It's there to remind you with the pain and with the mess and what have you. It's there to remind you all the time. And so, but when we have forgiven, we actually do have the opportunity to forget. And in fact, one of the, for me, one of the hallmarks of knowing if I've forgiven something is the memory well, let me put it this way. How many of you would say there are things that have happened in your life, and when you remember them, it hurts? Like, you just think about that incident and it's like you can feel the knife going in your chest. Anyone? Yeah. Okay. And so for me, one of the hallmarks of forgiveness that I've found is that when I've forgiven, that pain goes away. And so what I find is the memory of whatever it was, it transitions from this kind of visceral, painful thing that I experience again every time I remember it, to being a piece of history. That it's like, there was that thing that happened, and here's what I learned from it. But forgiveness takes things from that visceral, painful realm to it's a piece of your history, and actually, in a lot of cases, nothing more. Maybe it's a useful piece of history that you actually do remember because there are some lessons that you've learned and you want to share them with other people. There are other things that once it's forgiven, the pain goes away, and the incident just fades back into oblivion because there's no reason to keep remembering it. And again, I know that from my own experience. There are things that I've walked through forgiveness with, and literally can't remember what they were. I have notes, I can go back and find them. That. But when I try and remember them, I can't. Whereas they were things that I carried and were in the forefront of my mind for a long, long time, and were painful memories. But now they're kind of like, I can't. A bunch of things I forgave. I can't remember what they were. I'd have to go back and look at my notes when I walked through that. Alrighty. What was that?
I said thank you, this is helpful.
Cool. That's the aim. So the other thing about unforgiveness is that we are the ones, and this is again, I think a lot of us struggle with someone has wronged us and we don't want to forgive because we feel like we're setting them free. We feel like they're getting off without the punishment they deserve. It's unjust that they, how could they wrong me and not have to pay? So has anyone ever felt like that? Okay, 3 honest people over here. But the reality is, we are the ones, and we're probably in a lot of cases, we're the only ones who are carrying that burden. We are carrying that weight, and it's almost like a poison, because the longer we carry it, the more it kind of works into us and infects us and touches other things in our lives, causes us to repeat patterns, causes us to bring more of the same thing upon us. So by not forgiving, I think I heard this, that unforgiveness is like you drinking poison and hoping the other person's going to die. Because it is, we're the only ones who are being hurt, and we can't forget, and we keep carrying it. So how do we forgive? I think just related to that, I think another misconception about forgiveness is that I actually have to go to the person that has wronged me, and I have to go and actually forgive, speak to them and forgive them. I'd say in some cases that may be worth doing, but I would actually say that's an extra step that you may or may not take. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Because, first of all, the person may have no idea that they have hurt you. They may have no clue that an action that they took or a word that they said has affected you in that way. And I think about parenting, and think about your own experience growing up being parented. Do you think there's any time that your parents did or said something that kind of really hurt you, and they had not the faintest idea that was a bad thing? I know in my case, that's absolutely the case. My parents, I've walked through forgiveness exercise, with them a bunch of, aimed at them a whole bunch of times. They have no idea, and they need have no idea, because in most of the cases, they were completely unaware of what impact their words or their actions were having on me. And it's like, and do they need to? Do they need to? Another sticking point is, that person may be dead. So hard to have a conversation with them, because they're not, or maybe they're not dead. Maybe they're just out of you're not in any sort of contact with them at all. You don't even know how to find them. Another possibility, sad but true. Maybe they're just a jerk, and if they found out that hurt you, they'd go, yeah, good, I'm glad I hurt you. So for all those reasons, so for all those reasons, we can't, I can't put talking to the other person and engaging with the other person as a necessity for forgiveness, because in so many situations, it's actually not possible. And it's not helpful. So really, it's about getting ourselves into a state of we have forgiven them. If at some point down the track we meet them and it comes up and it's we can do some deeper reconciliation there, awesome. But it is I would have to say it is absolutely not a essential part of the process. It's about us getting free. And again, some people may say, well, hang on, but shouldn't they be set free, or don't they need to? How can you forgive someone if they're not aware of it? And to that, I'd simply say, well, Jesus, Jesus died on the cross to ensure that we're all forgiven, whether we know it or not, and whether we accept it or not. I mean, he's done his part in working, in paying the price, and we are now forgiven. It is then our choice whether or not we accept that. And so when we, so by the same extension, when we are forgiving, it is, whether that other person is aware of it or accepts it or acknowledges it it's sort of not that's not our part. It is our part to extend the forgiveness and be free ourselves. Alrighty. Okay, so down to the nuts and bolts. Because a bunch of this I'd sort of heard before, but no one actually showed me, walked me through how to actually do this. So, nuts and bolts. So when you're going to forgive someone, you got to be specific. Going back to my analogy of the accounting package, I had to go in and pull up the records and go, okay, invoice 2001, okay, forgiven. Invoice 2002, this amount, forgiven. Invoice, so I had to go through specifically what did this person owe me and forgive each of those debts. And so when we're forgiving, when we're walking through forgiveness for something in our life, we actually have to be very specific. What is it that I am forgiving? What was the wrong that was done to me? What is the price that I have paid because of that? And now I'm going to extend forgiveness to that person for that thing. So step one, you need to be specific. You need to know what it is you're forgiving. I would hesitate to say, if you ever say, well, I forgive them for everything, I would say that you've probably forgiven them for nothing, because you don't know what it is. You don't know what it is you've forgiven. So step one, you need to be specific. I think, again, the way I'm going to give the example, what happened, what was done, what was the impact on you, what is the price that you have paid. So having done that, you then pronounce forgiveness over that person. Say, I forgive you for blah, blah, blah. You then release that person. So basically, I'd say verbally acknowledge, like, okay, this person owes me nothing for whatever it was. I'm not holding this against them anymore. It's off my books. It's I'm not going to remember it. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to hold it against them. And then the final step is to bless that person. To pronounce life, redemption, goodness, over them and their life. And for me, often it's the blessing that I speak over that person may be related to the pain that I experienced. Because, and this is sort of side note, often but not always, the ways that people wrong us are simply duplicating the ways in which they have been wronged. And the pain that we have walked out as a result of the way they wronged us quite often is pain that person is carrying in their own lives. And that's not by way of excusing their behaviour. We're all responsible for what we do, but by way of, well, if you want to pronounce a blessing over that person, that's a good place to start, because they're probably hurting the same way that you've been hurting all this time. Yeah, exactly. Hurt people. Okay. Let's see. So, who do we need to forgive? I think actually one of the people we need to forgive that I think is probably one of the least forgiven people in our lives is us. Often we're our own worst critics because there's no one else there standing up for us when we're berating ourselves for the mistakes that we've made, the things that we've done wrong. So I'd say, make it a practice to forgive yourself, for the screw-ups you've done, for the stuff you didn't get right, for the dumb words that you've said, because we all have. Forgive yourself, release yourself, speak a blessing over yourself, because you need to. The unforgiveness of yourself is just as much of a poison as unforgiveness against someone else, except that you're drinking the poison and wishing that you would die. So that's like doubly bad. So forgive yourself. And then the other thing is, and this is probably could probably be a whole other message, but the other thing I would say is, when it comes to forgiveness, the further back we go, like the older something is, usually the bigger impact that will have in our lives. Because the wrongs that have been done against us a long time ago, we've been carrying those hurts for a long, long time. And baggage, just kind of, imagine you've got, a big bag, like a big duffel bag full of garbage, and you're dragging it along behind you. It's gonna collect like other stuff. It's just gonna stick to it, and it's gonna grow and build until what starts out as a little duffel bag becomes this huge thing we're dragging along behind us. So we'll walk through a little exercise a little bit later, or fairly soon. So I'd encourage you to don't pick something that happened last week. Try and pick something that happened, if you can remember something that hurts from when you were 5, I would say go with that, because the freedom that will come from that will blow your mind. So the further back you go, the better it is. Yeah. So then, what I often do, or the way I usually do this, is in my mind, imagine that I'm sitting across the table from that person, and just have a conversation with them in my mind of like this is what I'm saying to them. Whoever it is, tell them this. When you did this, this is how it hurt me. This is how it's hurt me over the years. I'm forgiving you. I'm releasing you from that debt. I'm going to pronounce a blessing over you. So that's something you can do anywhere, anytime. And another thing I've found though is that, especially for deep hurts, and I think also especially when you're kind of starting out on this, it can really help to have someone actually stand in for the person that you're forgiving. So actually, articulate that process, those words out loud to a person that is standing there in front of you. And that's something I've done, and Kerry's done. I think the kids, have you guys done that? Yeah, the kids have done. That can be really helpful. It makes it that much more real, that much more tangible. And having, where possible, having someone that is kind of somewhat representative of who it is you're forgiving. So, if the person you need to forgive is your father, having someone who's kind of like a father figure, or at least have a guy there. If it's it's a mother or a sister or a female boss, having a female that can stand in and be that person that you articulate that to, that can be really helpful. Not essential, but again, in my own experience, I've found that the closer they are to the person that I am needing to forgive, the easier it is, the more effective it is, the more readily the sort of the words and the truth come out of my mouth. So that's something I can sort of thoroughly recommend. And then one last thing. The other thing, I guess, to finish that process is, what I've found is in forgiveness there is always something. There's always been struggle, difficulty, bondage, call it whatever you want to call it, something, a blockage and a lack of freedom that has been associated with the unforgiveness that we've carried. And so there is always, again, in my experience and other people I've talked to, there is always a freedom and a blessing that comes with us giving up that debt to God. And so what I would say is, when you're done forgiving, ask God. So God, I've given this to you. What would you like to give me in return? Because I know you have something. I know you have some new freedom, some new blessing. And I think, I don't think you actually have to ask for it. I think it just happens. But I know in my case, some of the times certainly the first few times I walked through an exercise of forgiveness, there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened, and I had no idea that the two were connected. It was only after the fact that I went, hang on. After I forgave them for this, suddenly there was this stuff that I wasn't struggling with anymore.
I think you should give an example.
Okay, give an example. Yeah. Okay, so the very first time I actually walked through this, I was told, okay, who are you going to forgive? And so, first name that pops to mind. And in my case, it was my 2 older brothers. And growing up, and this is something I hadn't even known, they sort of talked down to me. I was the little brother. I was younger by 3 years than the two of them, and so I guess they talked down to me and sort of looked down on me. And it actually wasn't until we'd been to Australia a few times and Kerry had seen the way we interacted. I remember after one trip she said, "I really don't like the way your brothers treat you." And I was like, "What? How? Like, what? And I didn't even know." And she said, "Man, they talk down to you." So anyway, armed with that wisdom and awareness, that was the first thing that sprang to mind. And so I forgave them for the way that they had, the way they looked down on me and talked down to me and treated me like the dumb little brother who cares what you think, who cares what you know, and. So that was huge. That was a huge burden off my heart. But the interesting thing was, so on the way to this, and it happened at this business seminar. On the way to the seminar, I was. It was strange. I was comfortable speaking in public, so like this. But put me in a one-on-one situation, especially with someone I didn't know, and I just clammed up. I was miserable. I hated it. I couldn't do it. And so on the way to this seminar on the plane,
initiate any conversations with people when you were out and about. He was just pretty much.
If you wanted to make conversation with me, I was always ready with a yes/no answer. One syllable. I was, and I certainly would not initiate conversation. Certainly would absolutely not initiate conversation. So on the way to this thing, I read a book on the plane, got a taxi to the hotel, and just said, "Taxi driver, okay, take me to XYZ hotel," and I just looked out the window, and because that's how I operated. I didn't interact with the world around me. I just stayed to myself. On the way home, and I didn't even see this coming. On the